allocated for us. Indeed, you have allocated so much time for us on this earth. Time for us to learn more about you, to study you, but not just to intellectualize you, to just know about you is to be known of you. Lord, you know us, and you seek us. You pursued us throughout all of human history. You have pursued us and sought us out. Despite our rebellion, despite our brokenness and our flaws that we brought upon ourselves, you redeemed us. And we thank you so much for your love and your just mercy and your kindness towards us. And we also thank you that your love is made manifest through your Son, Jesus Christ. Lord, as we study the creation, your creation, we ask humbly that you would instill in us an appreciation for what you have done, and that you would enable us to be better stewards and to be ambassadors of your word and of your calling that you have called us with. We pray all these things through Jesus Christ. Amen. All right. So, like I said, we're still in Genesis 1. But today, instead of going verse by verse and breaking things down, because there's a lot. It's kind of, honestly, I'm more nervous about teaching Genesis than I was teaching anything in the New Testament. And it's not because it's somehow different in its importance or anything like that. It's just more it's more culturally removed from where we're at today. So it's very difficult, and I feel like my last class, maybe I got a little ahead of myself and got a little into the weeds too much. Because there's cultural context. There, you could dive into the Hebrew, because even in the very first verse, there's, how Hebrew is written. It's not like English in that they had an alphabet that then those letters just make a sound. No, every letter in Hebrew also means something too. So it's almost like a pictograph as well. And you can dive into the Hebrew, and I guess what I'm trying to say is there's so many different facets. There's so many different ways to go about this that it's almost overwhelming is what I mean. Whenever we read Hebrews, whenever we were studying through Hebrews, it's a little bit easier to teach because there's a clear message and there's like a linear progression through Hebrews. And yeah, you can kind of divert, go off on rabbit trails and then come back and stuff like that. But with Genesis, it's almost like there's all this meaning. It's very, very profound. And there's all these different facets. It's like a diamond and all these different facets. And we could spend probably a month just talking in Genesis 1, just talking about all the different facets. But I don't want to really do that. Not because it's not worthy to do that. It's not worthwhile to do that. It is. But I actually want to kind of step back. I'm more of a big picture guy. And so let me restart almost and step back. So I think what we're going to do is we're actually just going to read the entire chapter this morning. And if somebody could read verses 1 through 15. No, hold on. 1 through 16, and then somebody pick up through 17 through the end of the chapter. Chapter 1, yeah.
I'll do it.
Okay?
In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was formless and void, and darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was moving over the surface of the waters. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and there was evening and there was morning one day.
And somebody can pick up 16 through the end of the chapter.
And God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. And God set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness, and God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the fourth day. And God said, let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creatures that have life, and fowl that may fly above the earth in the open firmament of heaven. And God created great whales and every living creature that moveth, which the waters brought forth abundantly, after their kind, and every winged fowl after its kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let fowl multiply in the earth. And the evening and the morning were the fifth day. And God said, let earth bring forth the living creature after his kind, cattle and creeping thing, and beast of the earth after his kind. And it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth after his kind, and cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. For God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. And God blessed them, and God said unto them, be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. And God said, behold, I have given you every herb and seed which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in which is the fruit of the tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for meat. And to every beast of the earth, and to every fowl of the air, and to everything that creepeth upon the earth, wherein there is life, I have given every green herb for meat. And it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And the evening and the morning were the sixth day.
Great. Thank you. So, in this first chapter of the Bible, we see the truth of origins. The truth is, God created, and it was powerful, pleasing, and purposeful. So we're going to kind of dig into, again, kind of big picture. We're going to dig into these three concepts, that it was powerful, God's creation was powerful, pleasing, and purposeful. So powerful. This is kind of foundational here. God alone can create ex nihilo. And last class period I talked about what that means. That just means from nothing. And then the question may become, what is nothing? Well, I think it was Aristotle or Plato, one of them, said that nothing is what rocks think about. So nothing really is actually a concept that we struggle with as created beings, right? Because everything we know is something. Everything we know originated from something in a cascading effect down through time, right? You kind of heard of the butterfly effect. Does a butterfly flapping its wings in Asia cause a hurricane in somewhere else? The concept of that everything cause and effect, that everything has a cause and effect. Well, God is the great unmoved mover. He is the uncreated creator. He is the first, the unaffected effector. He affects things by just saying it, by just pronouncing it to be so. And like I said last class, this stands in direct contradiction to not only the imagined gods of the ancient Near East, so all the other religions of the day that Moses and the people of Israel were surrounded by. All those other creation myths and mythologies that were being disseminated around the ancient world, they all involved these gods and goddesses, etc., all contesting with already existing matter or chaos or forces, or there's some kind of cosmic conflict by which creation comes accidentally almost. Even mankind is sometimes just a product of, like I said before, last class period, mankind is just a product of random chance and chaotic energy from the gods, or even like weird things like killing a god and people spring out from his blood, or masturbation or other things like that are involved in the process, or sexual acts of other kinds. But not so with God. Not so with Yahweh. Not so with the God of the Bible. But this also stands in contrast to today. To those who imagine that human beings have any power or ability to manifest our own destiny or reality. Have you ever met people like that, who literally think that they are gods, that they think that human beings have some kind of divine essence, that we can project our will upon the earth and make it so? That power is reserved to God alone, who merely speaks and it is so. The question then becomes, why did God create all things? Why? I think we kind of get fixated a little bit on the how or the methods by which God created things. And those are interesting to study and worthwhile. But maybe the more important question is, why? Why did God even see fit to create? What do you guys think?
Well, he had the ability.
Mm-hmm.
Of course. Why not? Gee, if you had that ability.
Yeah. But God is self-contained within his own nature in a perfect concordance with his own nature, and he is infinite. So he didn't need to, right? He didn't need to create anything. He is perfectly satisfied with himself. Whenever we create something, you disagree?
I don't think he was happy with himself.
You don't think he was happy with himself?
I think that he wanted us.
Oh, I see what you're saying. You don't think he was content with his own company?
Yeah, I think he wanted more.
He wanted children.
We're a parent like now. We don't have to create children, but we have that desire.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in his image, we have that same feeling.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a pretty common perspective that people have. Yeah.
I think it's interesting, and we do. I do it. We do it. What we're doing is we're doing what you suggested in the beginning is we're putting our
Yeah.
limited human understanding and
Right.
emotions on God.
Anthropomorphizing God.
We are unable not to do it. It's just
Yeah.
It's the only way we can understand
Yeah.
it and rationalize it.
And God at various times has like a hen gathers its chicks around under its wings. That's how I would desire you. Or he chooses to convey himself as a father to us. As in that relationship, he chooses to convey himself as a father, portray himself as a father. And he is indeed our father. He's our creator. A common, if sometimes unspoken, but not in Jane's case, I appreciate your candor, assumption is that God must have created the world for a reason related to himself. Perhaps out of loneliness or a need to be worshipped. The scriptures don't say that. It rejects this. God as the Holy Trinity is a perfect communion of love, complete in himself and without any needs. God doesn't need us, guys. Yeah, he doesn't need us. He doesn't need the cosmos, the universe. He could gone. Everything you've ever known, loved, been surrounded with, gone in a moment. Disappeared. He could if he so wished. So why create then? That's the question that really we need to kind of grapple with here. Huh? Yeah, Susie?
Yeah, I was just thinking back, and I think it kind of goes with what you're talking about too. But when I was a teenager, there were the thoughts going around, and I believe it was science saying, you know, there's no way Noah's Ark would be able to float.
Mm-hmm.
This is just it's not. Of course, now they're changing their minds.
Mm-hmm.
But I even as a teenager, I thought, well, you think God, you seem to be accepting that God can create, and that He had Jonah there that went into the fish and was able to be
Mm-hmm.
spewed out.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you not think He couldn't have the power to make it float?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that's the part that a lot of people miss.
Well, we're so limited. And I think that's what I'm trying to, and Dad did a great job of conveying that, is that we're so limited in our mortality. We're not infinite. We do not even understand the concept of infinity. To us, infinity is just a concept. To God, it's a reality. That's His nature. That's His essence. His very being is infinite. He has existed for all eternity. So, sometimes people say, well, sometimes doubters or skeptics or atheists or whatever will say, well, if God created everything, who created God? He's outside of creation. He is outside of all things that are material. Time, space, matter, all these things are concepts, are not just concepts, are realities that God created and He is outside of because He is infinite. And so it is one of those things that because we're so limited, we sometimes try to put God in a box. We try to make Him easy to understand, as if then we can kind of check a box and be like, okay, well, God is this, move on. Categorize Him. He is uncategorizable. Even whenever Moses says, who are you to the burning bush, where God, the Spirit of God was in that moment, God says, I am that I am. Which kind of blows your mind whenever you start thinking about it. I am eternally that I am. You can't comprehend me. You cannot approach me in any way that is sufficient. I am that great being by which all things were made. Did you have a comment?
Well, I think there's still validity in the comments that were made, about parenthood and everything, because we are
Yeah, we're going to
created
move
in
into
the
that.
image of God.
Yes.
And so the implication is there's emotional, like
Mhm.
He's created us with an emotional response
Mhm.
that's not dissimilar to His.
Mhm.
And again, Scripture bears that out.
Mhm.
It's just really understanding the connection is
Mhm.
really not possible.
No, it's not. Yeah, Brent.
I think Philippians chapter 2 says that it was God's good pleasure. It
Yep.
says that for it is God who is at work in you, both to will and to work for His good pleasure.
Mhm.
He created us to seek Him and to have eternity with Him, but we can't have eternity with Him if we're not purified and if we're not changed.
Yeah.
And so we're born into this corrupt world, physical world, made by a spiritual Father who wants us to cling and to look forward to
Mhm.
life with Him.
Yeah.
And that pleases God.
Yeah.
And when one sinner, it says there's joy in heaven over one sinner who repents.
Mhm.
So I think He did do it. He doesn't need us. He wanted us.
Exactly.
And He wants us to seek Him.
No, exactly. And I think that is an important distinction. And this is great because this goes right into my next point. So why create? The answer, and people are giving it, the answer is pure, uncompelled, unforced love. You're right. His good pleasure. His own want to do it. Not a need. He doesn't need us, but a desire, a deep, deep desire. And we'll go into the pleasing and the purposeful, everything too, and it's beautiful. Creation was not an act of necessity, but an act of sheer gift. The teaching is that God created the world ex nihilo, out of nothing. He did not use pre-existing material, but brought the entire cosmos into being by his will alone, as the scriptures say in Hebrews 11:3. By faith we understand that the universe, so that's everything, was created by the word of God, so that what is seen was not made out of things that are visible. The sole motivation was a superabundance of goodness. And the church, historically, I mean, there's been 2,000 years of history of Christians contending with this concept, trying to grasp it. A church father called John Damascene explained, God was not content to contemplate himself, but saw fit that others should participate in his goodness. God conceived of the very concept of other. Within himself, he is self-contained. And then he thought, you know what would be nice? Others, besides myself. He said, God created the world not to get something, but to give everything, desiring other beings to share in his own eternal life and joy. God created the world out of love. He created it to make it a participant in his glory, joy, and bliss. God is ultimately unselfish. So it stands to reason if God is love, and that is his nature, love, that then he would desire objects to love. His creation he loves. And this concept stands in direct opposition to every other worldview of the day. Every other worldview, like I said, mankind is an accident. Mankind was created to be slaves. Mankind was in some cases like really horrifying concept of mankind was meant to be consumed. Mankind, like the Aztecs, that's what they believe. They believe that mankind is essentially just the more you feed the beast, the more you feed souls to these gods to appease them, the more, like the gods would be great and glorified through that. And just so many like horrible, dehumanizing concepts of humanity and other systems of the day, But with Moses writing this, inspired by God to write this, God is trying to convey to the Israelites, you are my beloved. You are my beloved. And by extension to us today, that the message is the same to us. You are my beloved. And that carries us into pleasing. So remember, said the truth of origins is that it was powerful, pleasing, and purposeful. Yeah.
I just wanted to say, we get it when we're working with our spouses or a friend
Mm-hmm.
or whomever, a sister. If the husband comes in and says, here's your Mother's Day gift, they didn't cost very little. Or when the husband comes in and says, you've been a dynamic mom, and I just am so pleased that I can give this to you.
Mm-hmm.
We can see the difference when it's us.
Yeah.
We just can't see it when it's God.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard for us, right? Yeah. So when God creates, so the pleasing aspect of creation, when God creates, it is good. He says it is good over and over and over again whenever he's creating, after he created something. Whether it's light and day or light and dark, he says it is good. Whenever it's the firmament, separating the firmaments, he says that is good. Land and water, separating them and creating the seas, he says that is good. The vegetable life, all the plant life, and the seed, fruit-bearing seed and everything, he says it was good. All the way up until man, he says it was good. And I think with man, he says, let's see. Yeah, and God saw everything that he made in the last verse. He says, I saw everything that he made, and behold, it was very good. And the evening and the morning were the sixth day. On the sixth day, he says, it was very good. The entire concept of goodness itself is established in God's nature and attributes. So what does that mean? What does that mean? The very concept of God's goodness is established in his very nature and attributes. What that means is we, as human beings, can't call anything good unless it is through the filter of what God says is good. We don't actually understand what good is outside of God, of God's character, God's nature. The first part, we can't even define what is good outside of a conception of God or an idea of God, or understanding who God is. Without an understanding of God, there is no concept of good. This is something that is actually quite profound. It's huge. It's foundational. If we don't understand that, so in our culture, and this is a little bit of a tangent, but it's related. In our culture, and in all of human culture, we want to define things ourselves. We want to determine what's good and evil. Do we do that perfectly? No. In fact, I would say we do it terribly because we constantly want to change the definitions. We want to mess with the definitions. We want to turn what is good into evil and evil what is good because it's expedient for us in the moment to do so. Whenever thinking of like say a CEO of a major company, and he wants to embezzle funds from that company, right? He tells himself all manner of things to justify it, right? Or whenever even a loving young couple that they love each other, they will find all manner of ways to justify sleeping together before marriage. It's like, well, we're going to be married eventually anyways, or blah, blah, blah. We always want to caveat what God has determined to be good and complete. We always want to say, add on to it or take away from it. He is the ultimate good. Therefore, what he desires and imagines is wholly good, and he is actively, intensely attracted to his creation. Think about it. If God is intrinsically good, what he creates is good, and therefore he is attracted to what is good. That concept that's woven through here, through the first chapter of Genesis, is an important one. When God says something is good, it's good, and he's attracted to it because he's attracted to all things good. God is actively attracted to you, and nothing can stop it. Now, yes, we're fallen. I'm not saying we're good in and of ourselves. That's not what the point is here. The point is, because we've fallen and we've sinned, and we'll definitely read through all the fall of man and all that concept here. But Christianity and ancient Judaism was not a dualistic religion. It's not that matter is evil and the spirit is good. That's called dualism philosophically. That's actually where Gnosticism came from. It's a very old concept. I mean, it's existed for thousands of years. It existed before even Gnosticism in a lot of ancient religions. But this concept of that matter is the result of evil forces or chaos, and then the spiritual realm is pure and holy and good, and there's like some type of separation between the two. That's not what God is saying here. He's saying, I created it, it was good. And accept that. We are used to thinking about humanity's longing for God. And it is true, there is a longing. we use the concept, you've probably heard it before, of like there's a God-shaped hole in our heart, or there's a God-shaped hole in our heart that only He can fill, right? And that is true. I mean, absolutely true. We long for God. Throughout all of human history, there's been these imperfect manifestations of that longing, right? To reconnect with that divine. But rarely do we consider the reverse. Christianity proposes a radical, counterintuitive idea. Divine, and this is a term, you don't have to remember it, it's okay. But it's just a theological term. Divine anthropotropism. What that means is God's intense interest, or being intensely interested in humanity. The teaching that God is actively and powerfully drawn to humanity, to His own creation. This concept is not a mere poetic sentiment. It is a theological truth about the nature of God's love. It was actually Queen Elizabeth II that said something pretty profound. She's actually a pretty intelligent woman, if you read some of her stuff. She describes this reality with a powerful analogy. And this is beautiful. I loved it when I found it. It is as though the sun felt for the sunflower the same powerful attraction the sunflower feels for the sun. Isn't that an interesting concept? We think, sunflowers, they turn towards the sun, right? Throughout the day, they will shift and turn towards the sun. And what she's saying is the sun is turning towards the sunflower, us being the sunflower in this analogy. That God is turning His face towards us. He's not some distant and removed creator who made everything and then just kind of left it, right? He's intensely interested in us, and He wants us deeply. This divine attraction is not conditional on our behavior either, our virtue or our success. It is grounded in the fact that we are created in God's image. And that concept of the Imago Dei, which I think I explained last time too, God's image, a feature of our existence that can never be destroyed by sin or even damnation. Even whenever those who reject God are eternally damned, they don't actually lose that divine image of God. That's why, as Christians, we strive to seek and save the lost. Because even though they are already condemned, it says in the Bible, they're alive still, they're already condemned. Those who believe not are already condemned, it says. But despite that, we seek them out because we are God's agents, right? And why do we seek them out? Because they are fellow image bearers. If our image bearing of God was conditional, then conditional on our behavior or our, external factors, then genocides, massacres, blah, 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 abuses, etc., would have no moral bearing whatsoever, or could even be justified. In fact, every despotic government or people group or whatever throughout history, at its core, that has committed these atrocities, at its core, they're denying the image-bearing properties of the people they're persecuting. Even today with abortion. With abortion, our country, many people in our country deny the image-bearing properties of people within the womb. We say, nope, they're not image bearers until this process happens. Or there's this change that happens later. Or once they take their first breath, then they're image bearers. That's absolutely in opposition to the Christian worldview. Christians, we look at the oppressed, we look at those who are the least of these, and we see them as image bearers, first and foremost, before anything else. And this is consistent throughout church history. Now, do we as human beings abide by that principle? Do we as Christians abide by that principle as often as we should? Probably not. Whenever we demonize our enemies or make them into, well, they're just animals. God have mercy on us. This love is not a passive state, but a relentless affection grounded in an image that can never be erased, like I said, or conferred by other people. There is absolutely nothing we can do to make God stop desiring us. How does this motivate you? Or how to phrase this? If this is true, how should we then live? Anytime we approach the scriptures, anytime we approach these truths and scriptures, we need to ask ourselves that question. If this is true, if God loves us so much that he is willing to turn his face towards us because we're his creation, how then should we live? Mm-hmm.
But the core of that is we still love them deeply.
Yeah.
The comparison is we should love them no matter
Yeah.
what.
Yeah. We're always trying to reflect God's nature, or God's character, I should say. As image bearers ourselves, we should then bear that image upon others.
God has been disappointed
Yeah.
and angry with mankind.
Yeah, for millennia. Yeah. And he has not forsaken nor neglected us. His faithfulness is always enduring.
Yeah, I love that. And often as they get any parent, especially of older children, they continue to make more and more decisions. But God, so you think of the concept of codependency, that sometimes even as parents or siblings or friends or whatever, that we can break a relationship by being codependent. Like we actually encourage the behavior that's hurting the person who's capable of that. God can never be codependent.
Mm-mm. Yep.
God's love will always be reflected in a way that is best for us.
Yep.
And sometimes that means he lets us walk away. And when he lets us walk away, he still yearns for us. That's what I think Carl was talking about. Is we never, and you were talking about it, we never stop yearning.
Yeah.
But even in that yearning, sometimes we yield to the decisions made by the people that we love so dearly.
Yeah.
But that's God.
Yeah.
God has his whole history with his people.
Yep. Yep. Hey, Armin.
I think the prodigal son is probably the perfect
Mm-hmm.
description of that
Mm-hmm.
exact thing.
Mm-hmm.
And all of the different attitudes that the people in that story,
Mm-hmm.
the brothers,
Yeah.
the son, the God and the father running
Mm-hmm.
towards and putting the coat on. I mean,
It's profound.
What an incredible, wonderful portrayal
Yeah.
of that truth.
Yeah. So profound.
So make sure you stay for the sermon.
And I have a Joel to lift it out.
My gosh.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think he immediately made a feast. He was so
Yeah.
happy that he came back.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And then this. Oh yeah.
Right. Well, I think for me, it kind of makes me think of the parable of the servant that was forgiven, the massive unpayable debt.
Yeah.
And the Lord forgives the debt and goes and finds the servant that
Yeah. A pittance. Yeah. Yeah.
And he, strangles him and throws him in prison. And it's like admonition for us to remember who
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and speaking of judgment, God's. Oh, did somebody? So.
I was just going to say, I love how you phrased it earlier, that God didn't create to give something, he created to give everything, and the consistency of his nature in Christ for obedience. He didn't come to the earth, it's consistent. We see it in
Yeah.
the Father,
Yeah.
we see it in the Son, like he didn't get anything from his time on earth.
No.
In fact,
Punished for his time on earth.
yeah, it was quite the opposite.
Yeah.
And it makes sense then that our calling would then match that, because we reflect
Yep.
created in Christ Jesus unto good works.
Yep.
God hath before ordained.
That we should walk in them. Yeah.
And that makes me think of that in a different way. He before ordained it because that is who he is.
Yeah. That's
The
his
good
nature.
works are his nature.
Yeah.
So we can do nothing less than expect nothing, give everything.
Yeah.
And the good works is
Mm-hmm. All right. So, oh, go ahead.
The fact that God is seeking us, I think this is something we don't quite get.
Yeah.
I'm speaking with myself, and I know myself, so I speak more with myself, not blaming you yet.
Yeah.
But the fact that he's God over everything.
Yeah.
He is so powerful and so everything. And like a preacher once said, if you have God, you have everything. If you don't have God, you
You
have
got nothing. Yeah.
And our natural response to somebody who is so above us in all our ways and our thoughts should be to love him back and to seek him.
Yeah.
He's seeking us.
Yeah.
And he makes no secret of it.
Mm-hmm.
He tells us exactly in the Ten Commandments and in what Christ says in the Bible and the other people that the Holy Spirit inspires, that we know what to do, or we can.
Yeah.
We read it.
Yeah.
It should be a natural response to
Right.
love him and seek him and seek to please him, like he does us.
Yeah.
But for some reason, we with mankind don't.
Yeah. And when we don't, God still loves us. But how that love manifests is different in our lives, depending on our relationship to him. So, there's absolutely nothing we can do to make God stop desiring us. Even the souls in hell are the object of his relentless affection because they are formed in his image. The same image he saw on the day his hands gave them shape. His love to those who love him is a restorative, living river flowing from his throne eternally. It waters the tree of life that heals the nations, Revelation 22, 1-2. But God's love to those who hate him is a burning lake of fire and eternal separation. It's the same love. It's the same love, but interpreted differently by whether we love him back or not. To those who love him, even the chastisement of the Lord is a blessing. But to those who hate him, it just drives them away further. Right? So it's like everything in the Christian life is about submitting to God's love. And then finally, I'm going to try and wrap this up real quick. Purposeful. Creation isn't a finished painting, it's a dynamic journey. It's easy to view creation as a perfect, static, golden age, pre-fall, that was simply broken by the fall. That's true, it was broken. But the brokenness is not because it was static, and then now it's dynamic. No. The fuller perspective, articulated by theologians like Maximus the Confessor, is far more dynamic. Creation was never meant to be static. It is an ongoing process, a movement from a starting point towards an ultimate goal. That goal, then, in the Christian life is glorification. And from the beginning, it was always glorification. Adam and Eve, they were partakers of the divine nature in the garden. And then they were separated by the fall. Not becoming God by nature, which is impossible, but the process by which all of creation is called into ever fuller participation in the divine life through God's grace. From this viewpoint, the fall was not the shattering of a static golden age, but a tragic failure to take creation forward to its appointed goal. That's the distinction here. Okay? Yes, we were sinless in a sinless state, but it was for a purpose. And now we are in a sinful state, but because of Christ's sacrifice, we're back on that track. We're back on that track towards that purpose of being fulfilled, or for the fulfillment of Christ through obedience to his will and ultimately glorification. Movement and development are integral to God's original plan. Movement, change, and becoming are not the result of a fall, but part of God's intention. Stability and rest in God is the goal of all things, not their beginning. So that's an important concept. The goal is the rest and being held in God's presence. That's not the beginning. That's not the beginning of it. The beginning was Adam and Eve had work to do. They went off the rails in trying to take upon themselves a mantle of responsibility they were not ready yet for. And that's often where we go off the rails too, is we want to skip the steps. We want to skip ahead. Fletcher wants to skip ahead in his lessons and skip things. And we have to go, no. You're not ready for that. Do all this work first. We as human beings, we do that all the time. Okay, that's all I wanted to. This means the universe is not a broken artifact of a lost past, but a dynamic project moving towards a glorious future. So, all right. Thank you for your comments and bearing with me. Appreciate it.